Prosperity in Black America. What will this require? Is Black business prospering? Are we reaching women and minority-owned businesses? How do we achieve earning parity for wealth for our families? Do our children really have access to education? Will our families have choices for our children? Prison pipelines, mass incarceration, tearing our families apart. A healthcare system not accessible to the masses. The disproportionate termination of Black women from corporate America. When will we actually begin to address what's really at play? How do Black people gain more power to help make these changes? This requires a lot of political will and courage. I'm that provocateur of change. I am Cindi Bright. Welcome to HeartBeat. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to HeartBeat this evening. I'm your host, Cindi Bright. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're looking forward to having a good discussion. We have some guests here that I will introduce here in just a moment. I just kind of wanted to do a check-in with everybody. I know we're all having pretty interesting weeks right now as we're 6 days away from elections. And let me bring co-host Erin Jones in while I do these intro comments, because I know we spend a lot of time talking about next week at this time, we should have some indication of the next president of the United States. Now, I know we'll talk more about that in the second half of the show, but Erin, welcome tonight. How are you doing tonight?
Doing pretty well.
You hanging in there? You're counting down the days?
Yeah, I am. And as you know, I'm also in hospice with my husband's mom. So I've been there, unfortunately, on way too much TikTok while I'm watching her sleep. So I'm ready for this all to be over.
I hear you. I'm grateful that it sounds like our prayers have been working for your mother-in-law. So that's awesome. Yeah. Tonight, we invited on a group of folks. We have, they are from the Harriet Tubman Foundation for Safe Passage. We have two people from there that we're going to introduce here in just a moment. They are the originators of the $200 million community reinvestment plan that was put together. Now we're going to talk with them about it. They wanted to come onto the show because we are getting ready to head into another legislative session. Time is coming. It's November 1st this week. And so they wanted to come have a conversation with the community about it. Some of the work that was originally intended with that plan, some things that have not been implemented as a result of that plan. So they wanted to talk with the community about that. And we've also invited a candidate for the Attorney General. Pete Serrano is coming on as he is interested in this work and is an ally for the work that the community is involved in with this. So let me introduce in our two guests from the Harriet Tubman Foundation for Safe Passage. Let's welcome in Dr. Jessie Miller. Hi, Dr. Miller. How are you this evening?
I'm great, Cindi and Erin. Good to see you.
Thank you for coming on. And let's also introduce in Lynn Idahosa. Hadn't seen her in a while up until a couple of weeks ago. Lynn, welcome back onto HeartBeat. I think you were on a few years ago. Welcome back.
So good to see both you and Erin. Thank you so much.
And then let's welcome in the candidate for Attorney General, Pete Serrano, who's here as an ally for this work. And so let me show the video that y'all put together just to help frame this up for the audience to see and get a sense for what this whole community reinvestment plan is about. So let's have a look at this.
I'm Cindi Bright, and today we need to have an urgent conversation about Washington's Community Reinvestment Project. This $200 million project is supposed to address decades of harm from the war on drugs in our Black, Latino, and Indigenous communities. But we're at a critical turning point that requires our immediate attention. The Harriet Tubman Foundation for Safe Passage, who helped draft this plan, raises a crucial point that everyone needs to hear. The system will work, but you have to participate. If you don't know how to participate, it makes it hard. These words hit at the heart of what we're facing. It's not just about having these programs. It's about ensuring our communities can actually access them, and more importantly, about fighting to keep them funded. Here's what's happening right now. The current funding ends the middle of next year. Let me put this in perspective. HomeSite received $2.85 million for homeownership programs, but that only helps 8 to 10 families. When we're talking about generations of harm from the war on drugs, we cannot accept this as the end. This program needs to be renewed and expanded, and that work starts now with the upcoming legislative session. We must emphasize a ground-up approach. We're taking this message directly to our legislative representatives. We'll be working with community leaders and lawmakers to develop strategies that not only renew this funding, but expand it to reach more families, more businesses, more lives. The Chehalis Tribal Loan Fund, workforce development grants, homeownership programs. These aren't just programs. They're lifelines that need to be strengthened and sustained. In the coming week, we're bringing together community members, program leaders, and current members running for office to map out advocacy for the Community Reinvestment Plan in the upcoming session. This isn't just about maintaining what we have. It's about building something bigger, something that truly matches the scale of justice our communities deserve. Stay connected on HeartBeat as we navigate this critical moment together. The Community Reinvestment Project cannot be a one-time effort. It needs to be an ongoing commitment to repairing decades of harm. Join us in making sure our legislators hear this message loud and clear to address the harms of the war on drugs.
So thank you all for pulling that together so that we could educate the community about what this is. We've had some folks on in the past that have been involved in this, but it sounds like, I'm going to turn this over to you. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Miller, because it sounds like your organization was the originator of this plan. You developed it, wrote it, and maybe you could talk to us about that process and then what your intention was with it by taking it into the legislature.
Thank you, Cindi. And first, I have to give props where they're due. There was a group of African Americans from Washington State, across Washington states, who actually worked to get the bill into legislation. With that, the bill did not get through. It died on the floor, but through their education and know-how and network, they were able to use that to get the bill picked up off of the floor and put into the budget as a proviso. And then that's how my organization came part to. We were contracted by the state of Washington to write how that $200 million would be distributed across Washington state. And what we did was we took the research. Number one, we took the research that had been done. There's been so much research about the war on drugs in Washington state and the harms that it has happened. We took the research that was already out there and just gathering dust as the number one part of our research, and had conversations with the people who participated in those research documents. And then we also included community leaders and community members across the state, as well as a research team to finalize and come up with the plan, which is the Community Reinvestment Plan, which the Harriet Tubman Foundation for Safe Passage is the author of, as I say, with community. It wasn't just us, it was all of us.
Thank you for recognizing all of the hands and feet. I know it takes a village to get things up and through. Lynn, did you want to add some more to that?
I did. I think what's so important about why we wanted to discuss things with you tonight is about what does a path forward look like? And although all the funds haven't currently been distributed, in June, this current project ends. And the intention was that these funds would create a path forward for mobility on an ongoing basis. And there's opportunities for that. We just have to look to smarter pathways to invest that. There's a lot of interest that's accruing that can be reinvested, so it does not have to be a part of the state budget, which we all know every municipality budget is seeking support at this time. So I believe that creating stronger contracts with banks to ensure that they are utilizing that pathway of the commitment from the state and the fact that they're making interest should be reinvested in communities as we look to the fact that they've received those funds.
So is what you're saying that the 200 million that was originally allocated for the community, there is no pathway, pardon the pun here for the moment, but there's no pathway to extend that 200 million yet. What you're saying is that you're bringing it forward so that the discussion continues, or that you're advocating for more dollars for this upcoming session?
Yes, absolutely. But I also think the fact that we should be reinvesting funds, but at the same time, we've bailed out banks a ton. So where's the accountability in that space? Because they're going to make $1.6 billion because they held those funds.
Who's going to make $1.6 billion?
The banks.
Okay.
So they were contracted specifically. Not every bank, right, is a part of this project, but the banks that were contracted are going to make 1.6 billion over time. And so they should have a plan for reinvesting that, because that initial investment should not be on the backs of taxpayers.
I'm not tracking, so it's my own ignorance. So I'm just gonna say that, and I'm just seeking more clarity because I'm thinking if I'm not tracking, other people who are watching may not track either. So $200 million was allocated from the state of Washington to be reinvested. Where does the $1.8 billion that you just talked about, where is that in relation to the 200?
I love that question, because we talk about investing in homeownership. Those are 30-year loans, which have interest rates. And that 30-year projection has a projection of gains for the bank. So based off the investment that legislature made, they will make $1.6 billion.
So you're saying the money that was invested into home ownership did not go directly to people. It went to banks, and the banks took the money and invested it.
Yes, because these IDA accounts, which aren't able to be spent any other way, that initial investment is held by the banks, not given directly to people. They hold that money in accounts, and they hold it to fund mortgages and businesses that they would launch for entrepreneurs, which was the point of the plan. In some ways, there's other ways that they've invested, but in particular ways.
So are you saying that the bank has not allocated any of those funds for home ownership?
No, I don't. That's not what she's saying. Is that the people who are really profiting from the way that the program is going out at this moment are the banks. I think the numbers that we had talked about it on that article, in that video we just saw, it was like 8 to 10 families received funding out of that 2 point something million, right? But the people who are really going to make the money is the banks. They basically got paid to give loans. Or is that kind of what you're saying, Lynn? They got paid to get loans, but they were giving loans anyways, right? Mm-hmm. They were already doing that. What I'll say from my position is that, we really wanted the money to get to community. Like, whether, organizations that would actually keep it out of the same old players, right? We know what our city, our state is looking like right now. And this pretty much the same people have been getting funded and refunded and refunded. We want new players, right?
So are you comfortable? Like, what's an example of that? Because again, I'm not tracking, but I'm not in that lane. And so that like,
if I say names, I'm not trying to be like, not saying that they're doing anything incorrect or not, but there are already large organizations who've already been doing this place. And so it might have just been easier because Commerce took so long to implement it, right? To just give the same old players the money. And I feel guilty about saying names, but let's just say like a United Way, right? Or something like that. That's a large organization that's been doing work for a long time, but they're not. I mean, I don't know really what their situation is, but that's the same old player. We would like to see new organizations or new collaborations between organizations put together.
Who would you like to see involved in who is an example of a new organization that you think that the money should some of the money should flow to?
I think I can tag team with Pete here and say we are seeing large numbers of folks that are previously incarcerated being released, which is amazing. And the service providers, for instance, in Pasco, where he's currently the mayor, are overburdened. But they're not a huge organization like United Way. So organizations like that could have received that funding so that they can properly support the communities that folks are returning to. Would you?
Yeah, Pete, do you want to come in and comment?
Absolutely. And thank you again for having me on. So there's a lot of elements here. To the point that Lynn made as mayor of Pasco, we see these services as folks re-enter the community. Back to the point, when housing is not met, obviously that's going to be a struggle to fully re-enter and reintegrate into the community. And so we do have some different local housing authorities. We do have local housing nonprofits that we could certainly bring monies back to. And I'm certainly not talking about just Pasco, but I think this is going to be across the board for all local governments who have the opportunity to bring people back into the community. But, from the perspective of the potential attorney general, I look at the concerns that Dr. Miller brought up. Commerce, if they took too long, was it held up by the legal team that was reviewing this? What was the advice as to the intent from the legislature to the execution of Commerce? And where was the attorney general? We know that the attorney general's office, has grown significantly. But when we look at the public safety side, there's some critical vacancies in assistant attorneys general who might be able to help with making sure that we have the ability to provide those public safety opportunities. So, I mean, it's just, I'm looking at it from the two hats of, yes, bring the money to my community, let's use it. But also, as a future hopeful attorney general, we'll know more on Tuesday. What can we do to expedite the process to get the money in use into the community? And that advisory role from the AG's office will be hypercritical to making sure that we get it to the right folks.
Got it.
Cindi, one of the things that should have been implemented first is the community advisory panels that should have been in the 6 main cities, right? That were chosen from the research we did. That even to this day has not been set up, and that should have been set up so that each community and the community members of there could have said, okay, this is what's going on. This is what our community needs. And this is how we think it should be done in our community. From my, and I should have I wrote it, so I should know a little bit more than I do, right? Mm-hmm. But I do know that was never done. That's still being done right now. And that should have been done before they're starting to throw RFPs, which are requests for proposals out to community, so that the community members could have prepared, so they could collaborate together and make the best choices for their city, their town, right? Instead of just, okay, we know this organization's there, they've been there 10, 20 years, let's give them the money. I'm not trying to be rude, but if you've been around that long and the problem is not fixed, maybe we need some new thinking, right? Mm-hmm. New folks to get funded, who think a little bit differently than the folks who've been doing it, not to take any away, but to work in collaboration. Because, there's always a way, there's sometimes
kind of a good time. We got a lot of changes happening down in Olympia right now. It's a good timing of us. Erin, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. So I don't run in this context, but I think about school improvement at the state level, and a lot of our school improvement disbursements sound really familiar. This sounds really similar to the way that money gets dispersed. And there are two things. Having been the assistant state superintendent over school improvement, there's these accountability measures over how the money can be used. And I think sometimes they're too stringent. Like, we need to have accountability, but then sometimes that accountability means we're spending $100,000 to pay for somebody to collect data that nobody looks at, right? So I think like what's the perfect measure of accountability? And then the other piece that I'm thinking about, and I sat on a board for a long time in education, College Spark, where we're giving money to those same old groups all the time. And then we realized, as I sat on the board, is there are all these community organizations that need access to resources, but they don't have a person who understands how to complete that RFP in the same way. They don't have access to the same research and data. And so how do we, as part of this process, make sure that there's a go-between? So one of the things we did with College Spark in the last year is we actually now have a team that goes out and helps that small rural community figure out, how do you fill out this paperwork?
Yes.
Can we partner with the University of Washington to gather some data so that when you deliver your product, like you're coming with the same stuff that the Gates Foundation is able to come to? Because some of those like smaller organizations that haven't had capacity, just haven't, they don't have capacity to do all the work that's necessary for a good RFP and for making sure that they're held accountable. So I'm curious how you're thinking about those things.
You're exactly right, Erin. That's exactly it. That's why.
That's the issue. That's the issue.
That should have been done first. It shouldn't be being done now when there's only 9 months left, 8 months left, right? When the funding's already been out and people are sitting there scratching their head. I have a contract. I might have won the contract, and it took 4 months after I wanted to get it signed, right? But then now, how do I don't have the money. I don't have the money to even implement this. And the state doesn't give you money first unless you're really smart and have the right people on your team to show you how you can make that happen. And so because this is particularly for people who are harmed the most, the BIPOC community, we know that their access to funding and to the resources and people who could help them, it costs, right? And whether it's time or cash that they don't have. So that should have been implemented way back in the beginning before the funding came out, so the people in community could have prepared properly, right? And Erin, that's exactly the reason. And I just want to let you know, like, we took that research because, again, when there's been great research done and nobody's implemented it, this is the community's reinvestment plan, because we took that research, we took all those things that hadn't been used from all across the state and put it into that plan, and we purposely made it short 98 pages, and made it readable so that people can participate in the process. But we can't make the state do anything. They make us hurry up just to wait for them. And that's been a problem. We don't have to wait when it comes to money that should be to our community. I want to say that the $100 million has been allocated to all the state organizations, right? But the $100 million that really should be getting to community, we need to be advocating at this time in this coming up legislation for community to say, hey, we want to be able to access our piece of the pie.
This came up on a prior show. This came up where I want to say 4 to 5 months ago, where and we had a lot of engagement from the audience on that show it was literally about this topic about how do you access. And one of the issues that came up was about the fact that we were having all of this turnover, and it was quoted on air that there was it 90 something jobs? Erin, do you remember that conversation where they were talking about, we have all these new positions that are coming open because of new governorship, appointed processes, like all of that, and the lack of transparency into what is happening in our state government. And so the community was asking these questions. How do we get this information? How do we access this? Where can we find it? Post it? So you're raising the exact same issue, which is we have tribes here in Washington state that have the direct in to get access to money, funding, what's upcoming jobs, all of that. And then you have the other 90% of people out here trying to figure out WTF. What are we going to do? How do we get access to it? And how do we get it allocated properly? That's what you're pushing for. And so, and the fact that you all are the original you drafted this, so you wrote this and understand what's in it. It sounds like now it's in Department of Commerce's hand. Is that correct? That somebody that we've got to get to the Department of Commerce, or what's the next step?
The Community Reinvestment Plan has a director, and of course the director of commerce is in charge as the top part. I'll just say that, if you don't know, you don't know about this project. I'm sure you haven't seen an ad on the television or on the radio or in the newspaper, right? And this is 2024. We know how to market, but pretty right now, the players or the players who were brought in during our research, during the time that the foundation was participating in allowing people, that's where a lot of the grantees came. But it needs to have a larger reach. But even more right now, besides a larger reach, we need the community advocating that it is not a project, because it went from a program to a fund and to a project. And a project sounds like a very short term.
Yeah.
And for us, the goal was always, in my conversation with community, that they would continue to work to get this money allocated every 2 years through the legislation. But nobody knows. That's why we're here right now, because we want your viewers to know. Yeah. We want your viewers to say, hey, wait a minute. Listen, this is the closest to reparation that has happened across the nation, here in Washington State. But it's been very hush, and we need to be loud about it. And not only do we need to be loud about it, we need to activate community to say, hey, we know that this has been going on, and we want it to keep, but we want to be part of it. We see that why didn't I hear about it before? We want it to happen, and we want it to be implemented in the way that it was written, not the way that you chose to do what you do, because you're 50% of your staff at Commerce is brand new and hasn't been there for longer than 6 months or a year, and they're still in training.
And so, if I'm running at the half mark here, if you're asking our audience to do one thing, is that one thing? What is that one thing that you want them to do right now to get this visible and acted on in legislative session this year? What's that one thing?
I guess number one is to go get the Community Reinvestment Plan and read it. That's the first thing. But the second is to talk to your representatives and see how is that funding getting down to your community, and how can you access it.
Lynn, did you have some thoughts about the one thing you'd like to?
Yeah, I actually wanted to pass the torch to Pete, because one of the main things I wanted to hear from him is that in his position as a current mayor and also as a potential attorney general, what would accountability look like to create the structure we're discussing?
Yeah, I appreciate that. The key thing as Attorney General is making sure that the government's functioning the way that it's claimed it will, holding government accountable, holding, those funds accountable. If they're supposed to be in the people's hands and they're not getting circulated, obviously I can't draft the marketing plan, but it's the opportunity to say, hey, look, we need to make sure that we're out there advocating for these funds to get into the community's hands. And as Attorney General, I can give certainly not only a poke to Commerce and the legislators, but if you all come up and testify, I can sit with you or have someone on my staff in there, say, hey, the Attorney General's office is aware of this issue. We need to get these funds working, and it's going to expire. They're not going to do what they were intended to achieve. We can't keep pulling the wool over Washingtonians' eyes and say, we're going to give you something and then fundamentally take it back by not giving it to you. It's like the sucker for my kids, right? They're not great sitting on the counter. They got to get in their hands. And so as the Attorney General, the other thing I can do is also share kind of that bully pulpit with you all and say, hey, look, let's have a press conference and express to the community what they should be receiving that they're not getting from their government that's been allocated for them. And that's fundamentally what I'm looking at as your future Attorney General, is just holding government accountable, whether that's Commerce in this case, whether that's, folks acting out of scope, whether that's a police officer, or whether that's your governor, or even someone in my own office, and making sure that the community and Washingtonians get what they deserve. And that's, in this case, there's a plan, there's money, and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Except back to the left hand that was writing the checks.
Thank you for addressing that, Pete, because you did answer a comment from a viewer who's asking the question about accountability. And so I appreciate that you addressed that here in your answer. So Julie, thank you for bringing that forward. Dr. Miller and Lynn and Pete, we appreciate that you brought this issue forward and that you discussed it here with the community today. And so it sounds like, to our viewers who are watching this, it sounds like if you are interested and care about either having access to this money, knowing where it goes to, etc., raise your voice. Go to your state representatives. If you don't know who your representatives are, they're on your the government website by your legislative district. Any final closing comments from the three of you that you want to cover before we sign you off?
I will say for the Harriet Tubman Foundation for Safe Passage, there's never been a reentry lobby day because this is a plan that is discussing the war on drugs and the harm it's caused. We are planning to host one this session. So please reach out to us, collaborate with us, because we want to move this forward. And we would love to help you figure out how to access these funds, because we have figured out certain things, but we definitely need to move this forward. And one time is definitely not enough.
Thank you, Lynn. Dr. Miller, did you have any final thoughts?
Remember to vote. It's coming up November 4th. Get your ballot in the box, if anything. Participate in the process. And we look forward to working with you guys in the coming years.
All right, Pete, how about you? Any final thoughts? We know you're going to advocate for a vote. So anything else you want to?
Yeah, Dr. Miller stole that thunder, but I will say, I look forward to making sure that Washington is safer and that programs like this are actually implemented as in their proper form. Working with Commerce to say, hey, you've kind of passed the buck back to yourself. Let's get this money out in the community. Let's make sure that we're advocating with the people that, brought it forward and with the communities it's supposed to serve. Let's actually get out, dig into the communities and get the money out working to provide a better Washington. So I look forward to just continually advocating for everyone here, not just on this program, but in the state.
Thank you to the three of you for joining us this evening. We're going to go to a quick commercial break and we'll be back. Thank you guys. Have a good evening. Aaron and I will be back after the commercial.
I'm Patty Cooterer, running for State Insurance Commissioner. When my daughter was born critically ill, I had to fight my insurance company for life-saving care. Now I'm dedicated to ensuring that no family faces that trauma, whether it's healthcare, home, or pet insurance. The commissioner oversees it all in Washington. I'll bring transparency, fairness, and work to lower costs. Vote for me, and I'll fight for you.
Paid for by Patty for Washington.
And that election is happening right now. So for all of us, I hope you've got your ballots in. Aaron, I hope you were able to get your ballot in. I was really grateful that they came on with us this evening to talk about some of these issues. If people don't bring these issues forward, we don't know this stuff is happening. It is kind of a black hole, if you will, of information that doesn't get filtered out to taxpayers and people who are carrying this. So I was really grateful that they reached out to want to come talk to the community. I had not heard, at least in some of the people we've had on, that they were even a part of this plan. So that's interesting all in itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had not heard either. So it was good to hear that information. And I would encourage people, I think always, one of the things I've been saying about voting is one thing, but you have to then hold your elected officials accountable by staying in touch with them and paying attention to what are the bills they're passing. And you need to continue to use your voice, because your vote is just one of the ways to stay involved, civically engaged. This vote that happens this week and next week is just one way. You got to stay on it in your community and the things that you care passionately about. And if reentry is something you're passionate about, make sure you know which state representatives are interested in that. And that's how we find information out. And I understand people are really busy, and you still have to be involved and engaged, or else stuff like this lots of resources, millions of dollars end up going unused or
Yeah.
swept up by the people who already know everything and already have access anyway.
I wasn't tracking initially about, for some reason I thought, what the little I knew about the community reinvestment plan, and I think it's because remember we had Anzane Slaughter on the show here where she was giving out money to homeowners. So I just made an assumption that that money was given to, was given
People.
directly from the state to the people.
I thought so too.
I did not know the banks were involved in
I didn't know either.
in that. So that's the kind of stuff that we got to get, that people need to, look, if we, as a nation, if we haven't learned in the last 4 years, this upcoming election, that we've got to not only get involved, but stay involved.
Yeah.
Things will happen right around us that we have no control over because somebody's not brave enough to bring it forward. And so, it's pretty eye-opening. I did not know that that was the case. And I did not know that they were not a part of the actual distribution process, the implementation piece to it. I just had no clue. And here I'm politically involved and didn't know.
Yeah. We can't know everything about everything.
True. True that. I'm glad people reach out and come talk to us. How are you doing otherwise? I mean, we are 6 days away from one of the most potential life-changing days in our life. And so you doing good?
Yeah. I have really mixed emotions right now. And I know we have talked about this a ton on here, but as a Jesus girl, I'm really struggling with the hate that's coming from the right. And I know it's been out there a long time, but just the really obvious and aggressive hate that we saw in the rally over the weekend at Madison Square Gardens is I'm just disappointed. I'm disappointed in us as a country. I'm disappointed in people. It's funny. I'm going to make a video about Dr. P, who was on that stage. So many of the things that he said from the Trump rally stage, he said while I was on his show. And I just I'm disappointed and not surprised. And it makes me sad because the reality is we are all Americans, and I can disagree with you on policy and still see you as human. And it's almost like there's a way that they see anyone who is not like them as less than human. And that part to me is just so disturbing. And because so many of them claim to also be Jesus folks, that I'm just really disappointed. I'm disappointed.
Well, I am hoping that, I saw some of the Bakari Sellers, some of the things that he was saying. Like, I'm hoping that the numbers are just being kept. There was something that was going on in Pennsylvania that I heard about today, that they said that Trump was already spreading lies about that he's being cheated in Pennsylvania, which made people think, including myself, that maybe the numbers there are stronger than what is being reported. And so, again, we pray that something good is going to come out of this, because Aaron, I just don't know. I don't know what to do if it comes out the other way. Like I'm trying not to think that way. I'm trying to just hold on and trust.
And it shouldn't be that way. It should be that we just disagree about policy. But right now it's like, who gets to be an American is on the ballot right now. It feels that way. And and that just makes me sad. And having grown up in Europe after World War II, there are just too many similarities that I'm seeing right now to just stories that I heard from the grandparents of my friends and people that I went to church with who were in their 60s and 70s when I was in middle and high school. And just the fascism and the groupthink and the normalization of really vicious language and vitriol, that it worries me. It worries me. Even should Kamala win, I really hope she wins by a landslide and that there's no question. And I also am not naive enough to believe there won't be backlash.
Right. Right.
And so I'm praying for peace, and I'm trying to stay as positive as possible. And I think I'm just really sad for us as a country right now.
Yes. Well, you're doing, I think you're doing better than most, because I follow your kindness project and some of the things that you're doing to help lift up people around you. It's hard. I mean, I hold on to some of your words sometimes, because I find myself, I'm just in disbelief a lot. I was in disbelief over the Puerto Ricans being called garbage.
Yeah.
Like I just,
Yeah.
I can't fathom any of this. I can't believe we talk about people like that. It's just too much. It's absolutely too much. So I'm just hopeful that something different happens in the next 6 days, and that we have an indicator.
And one of the things that I think the thing that I am realizing too, and I will make a TikTok video about this after we're done tonight, but I heard a podcast today, and it's by do you remember the VeggieTales little cartoon videos?
The who? Aaron, you froze up.
Anyway, I know, so did you. Hold on. I don't know what was going on there. Anyway, do you remember VeggieTales, the Christian videos that came out probably 25 years ago?
Yes.
So Phil Vischer, who was one of the founders, he has a really great podcast called Holy Post. And I've really appreciated their take on things. In the last 4 years, they've really helped me kind of see through all this stuff. They came out with a podcast, and one of the other has given, I'm doing my best to not villainize people who are voting different from me, but to realize that at the end of the day, on Wednesday and Thursday, when their world comes crashing down because they realize that this person that they've lifted up so high is not actually who they've made this person to be, when my family comes crashing down, I'm going to need to have some compassion for them. And so she said, I'm really trying to practice having that compassion now. And that was so good for me to hear, is I am trying to, and it doesn't excuse the behavior that I'm seeing, but here's one of the things that I really, really believe this. I really believe that what we're seeing on social media, that what we saw in Madison Square Gardens last weekend is not the majority of people who are voting Republican. Yeah. But that's what is being lifted up right now. It's being lifted up by the media. It's being lifted up by social media. I have way too many people that I know, and I don't know that I don't have any close friends who are Republican or who plan to vote for Trump. Most of my friends, even if they did vote for Trump in 2016, have not voted for him again. My Christian friends voted for him that way because of life, of their interpretation of life. But they realized in 20 and then now, this is not the person we want to vote for. But I think about people that I know of in my world who feel compelled to vote Republican because they've been trained. Good Christian people vote Republican. And it doesn't matter who's at the top of the ticket. They have been brainwashed, or they've been bathed so much in this idea that I have to vote Republican no matter who's on the ticket. I am trying to have a ton of compassion for them. And I just refuse to believe that all of them are racist and misogynistic and all of the things. And so are there some out there who are saying evil things and doing evil things and who believe that immigrants are awful? Yeah, they are out there. But I refuse to believe that most people who claim Republican are that. And so I am doing my best to stay curious and to stay compassionate, because the reality is we have to live together on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. And this is the United States. We have to find a way. And I am fighting to find a way. And it has to start inside of me.
There was I was trying to remember which show I watched today. It's something that I've heard in the past, but I haven't given it a lot of thought, which was around, well, I think it was Michelle Obama and how one of the shows was highlighting her comments about your vote is private, and the fact that there's actually these TikToks about the wives of the patriarchy and how they have to secretly vote or not tell their husbands.
Yep.
So I, miss fiercely single here. I haven't had to report to anybody. And so I just can't even fathom what that is like to live in a house with somebody that you can't even be an individual. You have to live in fear and so they were saying that if that demographic of women come out in full force, this is a slam dunk.
It's over.
Right. It's over.
I don't live in that world in the sense that my husband is not that guy. However, I was in a church with those people. So I absolutely do know women who either feel afraid or feel like they can't be of their own minds. Like they're not allowed to be independent thinkers. And so even though they know, man, this is not the person I want to vote for, they have been so trained to just whatever their husband tells them, whatever their senior pastor tells them, they just do that. I have been around that world, and it makes me sad because I think there is a whole demographic of people who have been taught that critical thinking is a bad thing. And I think that for me as an educator, that's the greatest crime. It's the greatest crime.
Yeah, no, I was, it's just foreign to me. So I don't know that my church, I'm not saying they didn't have it, but I just I hadn't paid attention to it. I did see, did you catch Vice President Harris at New Birth, Jamal Bryant's church last Sunday, in Atlanta? I just was so happy. I was in such a happy place just watching her come out and walk with him and her message to the congregation. I'm just so hopeful for her that I really love her inclusivity, her, I'm going to be here for everybody. And and she will, because that's who we are, where you care about the lives of all the people that you live around. But to your point, we've got to find a way. She wins and the world of some of these folks are destroyed. How do you live with? I don't even know how I'm going to deal with that. I'm trying not to think that far ahead. I don't know.
What's interesting today, and something that I saw her speaking about today, and you just alluded to this now, but I want to say it again because I think it's so beautiful, and it's why it's easy for me to vote for her. She said, in the end, should I become your president, my job is to support the people who voted for me and the people who didn't vote for me.
Yeah.
And I just think that is that's who we want leading us. And here's the other thing I really love that she said yesterday in an interview: I am not perfect. I am going to make mistakes. And I love that. I love her humanness. I love the way that she is just human. She's fiercely human, and she acknowledges that. And that's, as a leader, that's what I want. That's what I aspire to be. I aspire to be perfectly human and compassionate. And I know as an educator, my job is to educate every Muslim child and every trans child and every queer child and every atheist child and children with disabilities and rural children and urban children. And my job is to serve them all. And it's not to make them into my image. It's to help them find their best selves. That's my job as an educator. And I think what resonates so much for me with her is I believe that's what she wants for every American, is she wants every American to become the best version of themselves. And I unfortunately think Trump wants what's best for him. I don't think he actually cares about anyone else. And that makes me really sad because we have this big nation and we have so much potential. And I think our diversity is our superpower. And it can be, but he is presenting our diversity as a deficit. And I think that is a really dangerous thing, especially with all the beauty that is this country.
Which is all of us, and it's all of you. Aaron, I don't want to hold you long tonight. I'm grateful. I kind of wondered if you would be willing to close the show out in prayer tonight, because we've got 6 days.
I will.
I'll let you do that. Okay.
Oh,
Whew.
to our God. I thank you, God, that you know all things and that you can see all things. And I pray for shalom, that true peace that only you can bring. And I pray that you would help each one of us out here as we move through these next 6 days, be the best version of ourselves. I pray that you would help us to lift up our neighbor, even that neighbor next to us or down the street who has a sign in their yard that is different from the sign we have in our yard. I pray that you would help us to truly live. And that means patience, it means grace, it means long suffering. It means to not hold on to the things that we've seen people do that we disagree with. And so help us to forgive. Help us to be the kind of people moving through the world that make other people better. I pray that each one of us, as we move through these next 6 days, in our words and in our actions, would make every room better because we were there. And I am so grateful. I'm grateful that I was born in this country. I am grateful that I got to live in another country and then choose to come back here and to serve this country. I thank you that you made it so clear to me when I was 18 years old that I had been born here for a reason, that you made me in this body for a reason. And I thank you that both Cindi and I get to serve this country. We get to serve you and we get to serve this country. And so help us be the best servants possible. Help us to be your hands and feet as we move through the world, as we show up on social media and on here on the show. And we just thank you for the opportunity to have a voice. And I pray that you'd help us to continue to use our voices responsibly and with compassion. We thank you, God. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We look forward to next Wednesday's show. Blessings to everybody. Good night.